The Forbidden Garden and the Hole in the Ground. In the year 475 BC, a Chinese politician and master strategist named Fan Li resigned from his high-ranking government post, gave away all his properties to the poor, and moved to a remote province to start over. He changed his name to Tao Zhu and became a simple commoner. But within a few years, he had accumulated a massive fortune all over again. When the king asked for his secret, Fan Li didn't talk about war, politics, or high-interest loans. Instead, he wrote a short treatise called the Yang Yu Qing, the Treatise on Fish Culture. It was a manual about a hole in the ground filled with water. To most people today, a pond is a decorative problem, a source of mosquitoes, slime, and constant maintenance. But to Fan Li, that hole in the ground was a hidden system of total autonomy. It was a biological engine designed to feed a family for decades without a single trip to a market, without commercial feed, and without the need for government approval. For 2,500 years, this knowledge survived wars, dynasties, and revolutions because it was too valuable to lose. It allowed small rural communities to survive periods of famine and total economic collapse. Yet, if you look around today, you'll notice that this system has been almost entirely scrubbed from our collective memory. It was forgotten, not because it stopped working, but because it works too well for the individual, and not well enough for the system. We live in an era of supply chain fragility. We are tethered to the supermarket by an invisible umbilical cord. Every week we pay a subscription fee for our survival, purchasing meat, eggs, and vegetables produced by massive agro-conglomerates. The modern food industry is built on a business model of repeat purchases. The supermarket earns when you return. The poultry factory earns when your previous dozen eggs are gone. But when you build an autonomous pond, you become a lost customer forever. You stop depending on the logistics of a globalized world and start depending on the nitrogen cycle of your own backyard. To understand the hidden economics of this, we have to look at the protein paradox. In traditional land-based agriculture, the cow is king. But a cow is a biological nightmare of inefficiency. To produce a single cow, you need acres of pasture for grazing, veterinary care, and thousands of gallons of water.
A single acre of high-quality pasture might yield between 20 to 25 kilograms of beef per year. Now, look at the water. In the 1960s, a group of scientists at Auburn University in Alabama, led by the legendary H.S. Swingle, began to test ancient Chinese polyculture methods. Swingle is often called the father of pond management, and he viewed a pond not as a hobby, but as a high-density agricultural crop. His results were staggering. Using a small pond of just 100 square meters, roughly the size of a tiny vegetable garden, Swingle was able to produce up to 160 kilograms of fish per year. Mathematically, that means a small hole in the ground produces 6 to 7 times more protein per square foot than the finest cattle pasture on Earth. And it does so with almost zero daily labor, no commercial feed, and no machinery. The pond is a space-filling fractal of life. While the cow can only walk on the surface of the land, the fish utilize the entire three-dimensional volume of the water. Fan Li's system was built on a concept called polyculture. In the industrial West, we prefer monoculture, growing one thing in one place. We build massive tanks for just catfish or just tilapia. This is fragile. If one fish gets sick, they all get sick. If the pH shifts, the entire crop dies. But Fan Li designed a biological orchestra. He didn't just stock one type of fish. He built a hierarchy of species that occupied different floors of the pond. He described techniques for constructing ponds with 9 islands and 8 pits. This wasn't just for aesthetics. The islands and pits created different depth zones and temperatures, allowing different species to thrive simultaneously. He used the common carp as his foundation because it was fast-growing and non-cannibalistic. But when later dynasties banned the eating of carp because the emperor's name sounded like the word for carp, the peasants innovated even further. They added the silver carp to filter the microscopic plankton, the big head carp to eat the larger algae, the mud carp to act as the janitors of the bottom debris, and the grass carp to graze on the macro vegetation. Each species occupied a different ecological niche, meaning there was no competition, only cooperation. The waste of one fish became the food for the next. This is the definition of a closed-loop system.
In a supermarket economy, we take nutrients from the soil, turn them into food, eat the food, and flush the waste into the ocean. It is a linear path to exhaustion. But in a Fan Li pond, the nutrients never leave. The system harvests sunlight through plants, turns that energy into fish protein, uses the fish waste to fertilize the plants, and repeats the process forever. Why, then, did we stop teaching this in agricultural universities? Why did the government shift its focus to massive centralized poultry and pig factories? The answer lies in control. A centralized factory is easy to tax, easy to regulate, and easy to monitor. But a million small autonomous ponds on the edges of villages are a nightmare for a centralized bureaucracy. They represent a level of strategic disappearance from the taxable economy that the modern state cannot tolerate. We have been trained to believe that food security comes from a higher bank balance or a bigger grocery store. But true food security is a biological law, not a financial one. Fan Li understood that if you control the water and the life within it, you are truly free. But how do you actually build this today? How do you turn a muddy hole into a carbon machine that produces 900 eggs and 160 kilograms of meat a year without buying a single bag of feed? To find the answer, we have to look at the hidden managers of the pond, the ducks, the bacteria, and the specific sequence of biological activation. The biological engine and the nitrogen ghosts. If you view a pond as just a collection of water and fish, you have already failed as a biological architect. To understand the Fan Li system, you must stop thinking like a fisherman and start thinking like a systems engineer. A truly autonomous pond is not a farm that you feed, it is a self-regulating carbon machine where every organism is a gear in a larger mechanism. In the industrial food complex, we solve problems with external inputs. We add mechanical aerators for oxygen, chemical filters for waste, and expensive pellets for growth. But Fan Li and his modern successor, H.S. Swingle, realized that nature has already provided these components for free. You just have to know how to plug them in. The first and most important module in this system is the duck. In traditional Chinese aquaculture, the duck is not just a secondary product. It is the biological manager of the pond. Scientists often refer to ducks as moving carbon machines because of their unique impact on the water's chemistry. When ducks swim, their constant paddling acts as a natural bioaerator, disturbing the surface and facilitating the diffusion of oxygen into the water. But their real work happens at the bottom. As they dabble in search of food, they agitate the pond floor, lifting nutrients trapped in the silt and making them available for the rest of the food chain. Their most vital contribution, however, is waste distribution. A single duck produces droppings rich in carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus, the three essential building blocks of life. In a centralized industrial system, manure is a toxic pollutant that must be hauled away. In the Fan Li pond, it is a high-octane fuel. Because ducks distribute their waste constantly and evenly across the entire surface of the pond, they prevent the nutrient heaping that causes toxic dead zones in industrial tanks. This manure feeds the phytoplankton, which feeds the zooplankton, which ultimately feeds the fish. A small group of just 5 ducks can generate 900 eggs a year while simultaneously reducing your fish feed costs to nearly zero. But a system that is constantly being fueled by duck waste would quickly become toxic if not for the nitrogen ghosts, the Nevidimeae, invisible workers known as nitrifying bacteria. This is where the chemistry of the pond becomes a life or death struggle. Fish and ducks produce ammonia as a metabolic byproduct, which is highly toxic and can dissolve fish gills like acid. To prevent a total system crash,
you need a colony of Nitrosomonas and Nitrobacter bacteria. These microscopic architects perform a two-step magic trick. They oxidize toxic ammonia into nitrites and then into nitrates. Nitrates are harmless to fish, but act as a powerful liquid fertilizer for plants. This brings us to the lungs and kidneys of our biological machine, the aquatic plants. In a standard garden pond, plants like reeds, duckweed, and water lilies are often treated as weeds to be removed. In the Fan-Li system, they are the system's organs. Reeds and cattails, typha, growing along the edges act as the pond's kidneys, pulling excess nitrogen and phosphorus out of the water to build their own stalks, which prevents the pond from suffocating under an algae bloom. Submerged plants like Elodea are the lungs, saturating the water with dissolved oxygen during the day through photosynthesis. Then there is the duckweed, Lemna. This tiny floating plant is a biological miracle. Under optimal conditions, duckweed can double its biomass every 48 hours, absorbing nutrients so efficiently that it is used in modern industrial wastewater treatment. For the autonomous farmer, duckweed is a self-renewing conveyor belt of high-protein feed that costs exactly $0. The ducks eat the duckweed, the waste from the ducks fertilizes the plants, and the plants purify the water for the fish. It is a closed-loop symphony of thermodynamics. However, the most common reason modern attempts at this system fail is temporal impatience. We live in an instant culture, but biological systems require a specific activation sequence. Fan-Li understood that you cannot simply dig a hole, fill it with water, and throw in the fish. You must build the system from the bottom up. The Fan-Li algorithm follows a strict 4-week rule. First, you install the kidneys and lungs, the reeds and submerged plants. Then you must wait 2 to 4 weeks before adding a single animal. Why? Because you are waiting for the bacteria to colonize every square inch of the pond's surface, the rocks, the roots, and the soil. This period is called bacterial settlement. If you add fish before this invisible workforce is established, the ammonia will spike, and the system will experience a new pond syndrome crash. Only after the water achieves a sparkle or luster, a sign of established biological balance, do you introduce the ducks, and finally, the fish. By following this ancient sequence, you aren't just raising food, you are engineering a space-filling fractal of life. The cow on land can only exist on a two-dimensional plane, but in Fan-Li's pond, every cubic inch of the three-dimensional volume is working for you. The surface belongs to the ducks and the white aimer, the middle layers to the silver carp, and the dark bottom to the common carp and the bacteria. But how does this system handle the harsh reality of winter? And what is the exact protein mix you need to ensure the pond doesn't just survive, but thrives for decades? To find out, we have to look at the final piece of the puzzle, the Polyculture Blueprint and the economics of the pound-for-pound harvest. The skyscraper of water and the price of freedom. To truly appreciate the genius of Fan-Li's system, you have to stop looking at the pond as a flat surface and start seeing it as a three-dimensional skyscraper. In modern industrial farming, we practice monoculture, the biological equivalent of a one-story warehouse. We fill a space with one species, feed it one type of processed pellet, and hope for the best. But Fan-Li and the later Tang Dynasty innovators understood the concept of the space-filling fractal. They realized that every cubic inch of water has a specific energy potential, and if you don't fill that niche, nature will fill it with something useless, like toxic algae. The blueprint of the penthouse belongs to the grass carp, also known as the white amour. This fish is the lawnmower of the system. It stays near the surface and along the edges, consuming macro-vegetation, reeds, grass, and aquatic weeds. It converts tough cellulose into high-quality protein with terrifying efficiency. Below them, in the middle offices, live the silver carp and the bighead carp. These are the pond's internal filtration units. The silver carp filters microscopic phytoplankton, while the bighead focuses on larger zooplankton. Without them, the nutrients provided by the ducks would cause an algae bloom that would suffocate the pond. They don't need you to buy them food. They simply breathe the water and turn its green soup into meat. Finally, in the basement and maintenance floor, we find the common carp and the mud carp. These are the janitors. They sift through the organic debris and waste that falls from the layers above. They dig into the silt, disturbing the bottom and preventing the buildup of anaerobic gases. In a Fanli pond, there is no such thing as waste. There is only food that hasn't been eaten yet. Each layer of this biological skyscraper feeds the layer below it, creating a hierarchy of survival where the net energy loss is almost zero. This is why H.S. Swingle's experiments at Auburn University were able to produce 6 to 7 times more protein than a cattle pasture of the same size. You aren't just farming on the land, you are farming the entire volume of the void. But for many, the greatest fear isn't biological, it's meteorological. How does a system built on ancient Chinese wisdom survive a brutal northern winter? This is where the winter buffer comes into play. Most of the fish in this polyculture, especially the carp and the crucian carp, are masters of metabolic defense. When the water temperature drops below 46 degrees Fahrenheit, they enter a state of torpor.
They sink to the deepest part of the pond, those 8 pits Fan Li described 2,500 years ago, and slow their heartbeats to a near halt. The only thing they need is gas exchange. As long as the pond is at least 6 feet deep, the bottom remains at a constant 39 degrees Fahrenheit, even if there is 2 feet of ice above. The only danger is a total ice seal that traps carbon dioxide and prevents oxygen from entering. The autonomous solution is simple: a single air hole or a primitive solar-powered aerator. If you provide that one tiny window of gas exchange, your food bank will wait for you under the ice, frozen in time, ready to reactivate the moment the spring sun hits the water. And if the worst happens, the crucian carp acts as your biological insurance policy. It is one of the hardiest fish on the planet, capable of surviving in oxygen-deprived water that would kill almost any other species. It ensures that no matter how hard the winter, you will never harvest an empty pond. Now, let's look at the hidden math of autonomy. We live in a world where the Russian meat market alone is worth 3 trillion rubles a year. The market for eggs is hundreds of billions more. This is a system of perpetual subscription. You are a customer who must pay every 7 days to keep your family fed. To build a Fan Li pond today, your initial investment, including a high-quality butyl rubber liner, the kidney plants, and the initial seed fish, ranges between 8,000 and 35,000 rubles. This is a one-time fee. Once the nitrogen cycle is established and the nitrogen ghosts, the bacteria, have colonized the rocks, your operational costs drop to near zero. A group of just 5 ducks can produce 900 eggs a year, while simultaneously fueling the fish population that provides 160 kilograms of meat. Compared to the lifetime cost of supermarket meat, the pond pays for itself in less than 18 months. After that, every egg and every fish is a 100% dividend paid to you by the sun and the water. This is exactly why this knowledge was forgotten for 70 years. From the perspective of the state and the agro-conglomerate, a person with an autonomous pond is a financial black hole. You cannot be taxed on the fish you grow yourself. You cannot be manipulated by rising food prices if your eggs come from your own backyard. You have achieved a level of strategic disappearance from the chain of dependency. When Fan Li resigned his post in 475 BC, he didn't just give up power. He discovered a more profound form of it. He realized that the ultimate strategy isn't winning a war, it's making it so that the war doesn't affect you. The pond is a quiet act of polite audacity. It is a refusal to participate in a fragile system. As the global supply chain becomes more complex and the price of survival continues to rise, the most revolutionary thing you can do is dig a hole. Build the 9 islands.
activate the bacteria, introduce the ducks. In a world of digital slop and economic instability, the person who can feed their family from a simple pit of water is the only one who is truly free. Nature is waiting for you to flip the switch. The blueprint is 2,500 years old, but the biology is as fresh as tomorrow morning. It's time to stop being a customer and start being an architect of your own existence. Freedom doesn't come from a bank account. It comes from the water.